The Empire had ruled the sector for 12,000 years. Their warships numbered in the millions. Their conquered species numbered in the hundreds. Every civilization in the known galaxy understood one simple truth. They were the most powerful force in existence. No one challenged them. No one dared to even try. This was the way things had been for longer than most species could remember. The controlled trade routes, harvested resources from countless worlds, and crushed any hint of rebellion before it could grow. They believed themselves to be the masters of all creation. They believed nothing could ever threaten their dominance. They were wrong. On what seemed like an ordinary day in the capital system, something impossible happened. A ship appeared out of nowhere. It materialized in the heart of their most protected territory, bypassing every sensor grid, every patrol route, every defensive measure they had spent centuries building. The ship was small by standards. It measured only 400 meters in length. Its hull was gray and angular, covered in strange markings that no database could identify. On its side, painted in white letters, were words in an unknown language. USS Defiance. Commander Jake Harrison stood on the bridge of that ship, staring at the holographic display in front of him. Red warning lights flashed across every screen. Alarm tones filled the air. His crew moved quickly at their stations, trying to make sense of what had just happened. Jake was a tall man with short brown hair and calm gray eyes. He had served in the United Earth Navy for 22 years. He had seen combat, survived disasters, and led his crew through situations that would have broken lesser officers. But he had never seen anything like this. "Report," he said, his voice steady despite the chaos around him. Lieutenant Commander Lisa Monroe turned from her station. She was his executive officer, a woman with sharp features and even sharper instincts. Her face was pale as she studied the data streaming across her console. "Sir, the jump drive malfunctioned during our transit. We overshot our destination by a factor I cannot even calculate. We are nowhere near Earth. We are nowhere near any charted territory." She paused and took a breath. "I am detecting massive energy signatures all around us. Thousands of them. They appear to be warships." Jake processed this information without showing any emotion on his face. He had trained himself long ago to remain calm when others would panic. Panic got people killed. Clear thinking kept them alive. "Can you identify the ships?" Lisa shook her head. "Nothing in our database matches their design. These are alien vessels, Commander. We have made first contact." The words hung in the air like a weight. First contact. Humanity had wondered for centuries whether they were alone in the universe. They had searched the stars, sent probes into the void, and listened for signals from distant worlds. Now, by pure accident, they had found their answer. Before Jake could respond, the communications console lit up. Lieutenant Amy, a young woman with black hair tied back in a practical bun, looked up with wide eyes. "Sir, we are being hailed. Multiple frequencies. I am detecting over 300 warships moving toward our position." Jake nodded slowly, put it on the main screen. The flickered and then displayed an image that would haunt human history books for generations. The creature that appeared was tall and with a body covered in iridescent scales that shimmered like oil on water. Its head featured two massive compound eyes that reflected the light in dozens of colors. Mandibles clicked beneath those eyes as the creature spoke. "Unknown vessel." The voice came through a translator, flat and mechanical. "You have violated the sovereign space of the Empire. You will surrender immediately. You will power down your weapons. You will prepare to be boarded. Failure to comply will result in your immediate destruction." Jake studied the alien for a long moment. He had imagined first contact many times during his career. He had pictured peaceful exchanges, careful diplomacy, the slow building of understanding between species. He had not pictured this. "I am Commander Jake Harrison of the Earth vessel Defiance," he replied, keeping his voice calm and reasonable. We mean you no harm. We experienced a navigation malfunction and arrived here by accident. We would like to leave peacefully. If you could provide us with stellar coordinates, we will be on our way." The commander made a sound that might have been laughter. Its mandibles clicked rapidly, and its compound eyes seemed to shine with cruel amusement. "You misunderstand your situation, creature. No one leaves space. Your vessel will be seized. Your crew will be processed and assigned to labor colonies. Your technology will be studied and replicated. This is not a request. This is not a negotiation. This is your only warning." The transmission ended abruptly. Jake sat in silence for a moment. Around him, his crew waited for orders. He could see the fear in their eyes, the uncertainty. They were alone in hostile territory, surrounded by hundreds of enemy warships, with no hope of reinforcement or rescue. Lisa spoke quietly. "Sir, they are powering weapons. I am reading energy buildups across their entire fleet." Jake made his decision. He had hoped for peace. He had offered peace, but he would not sacrifice his crew to satisfy alien arrogance. "Red alert," he said calmly. "All hands to battle stations. Raise shields and charge the main batteries." The lights on the bridge shifted to a deep red. Throughout the ship, men and women ran to their positions. Weapons systems came online with a low hum that vibrated through the deck plates. Jake opened a channel to the fleet. "I am going to give you one chance to reconsider. Stand down and let us leave, or you will regret what happens next." The only response was the sight of 300 warships opening fire. What happened in the next 4 minutes and 37 seconds would change the course of galactic history. The human warship moved with a speed and precision that everything they understood about physics. It danced between energy beams that should have torn it apart. Its weapons fired in patterns so complex that no targeting computer could predict them. One by one, the ships began to explode. Their shields, which had withstood attacks from every known species, failed instantly against human weapons. Their hulls, designed to survive the harshest conditions in space, were torn apart like paper. When it was over, the USS Defiance hung alone in a field of debris. 300 warships had been reduced to scattered wreckage. The most powerful fleet in the sector had been annihilated by a single vessel from an unknown species. On the bridge, Jake Harrison let out a long breath. His ship had survived, but he understood that their problems were only beginning. They had just made enemies of an empire that spanned thousands of worlds. "Damage report," he said quietly. Chief Engineer Cole responded over the intercom. "Minor hull damage on decks 7 and 12. Shields held through most of the engagement. The jump drive is still offline. I need time to repair it." Jake nodded. "How much time?" 6 days, maybe 5 if we push hard." 5 days. They would have to survive in hostile territory for 5 days before they could even attempt to return home. Lisa moved to stand beside him. "Sir, what do we do now?" Jake looked at the debris field on the. Somewhere out there, word of what had happened was already spreading. They would send more ships. Other species would hear the news. The galaxy was about to learn that humanity existed. "We find a quiet place to hide," Jake said. "We make our repairs, and we hope that no one else decides to pick a fight before we can get home." It was a simple plan. It would not remain simple for long. News traveled faster than light in the connected galaxy. Within hours of the battle, every major civilization in the known sectors had received reports of what had happened in space. The information spread through trade networks, diplomatic channels, and intelligence services. By the time the debris from the destroyed fleet had finished cooling, half the galaxy knew that something impossible had occurred. High Arbiter of the Dominion Council sat alone in his private chambers, reviewing the sensor data for the 6th time. He was an old being, his blue skin wrinkled with age, his 3 hearts beating in a rhythm that had grown irregular with stress. He had served the Dominion for over 200 years. He had witnessed wars, treaties, and the rise and fall of civilizations, but he had never seen anything like this footage. The recording showed the human vessel moving at speeds that should not have been possible. It dodged weapons fire as if it could predict where each shot would land. Its own weapons cut through shields like a blade through smoke. The entire engagement lasted less than 5 minutes, and at the end of it, 300 of the most advanced warships in the sector had been reduced to floating rubble. "This cannot be accurate," muttered to himself. They had fifth-generation plasma barriers. Nothing in existence can penetrate them so easily. His aide, a young diplomat named, entered the chamber with more reports. Was eager and intelligent, but even he looked shaken by the news. "High Arbiter, the data has been by 9 independent sources. There is no error. The human vessel employed weapons technology that our analysts cannot identify. Some believe it may be a form of directed antimatter projection. Others think it might be something even more advanced." Closed his eyes and tried to calm his racing hearts. The Dominion had spent centuries believing themselves to be among the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. They had watched the Empire with careful respect, never daring to challenge such power directly. They had accepted their place in the galactic order. And now a single ship from a species no one had ever heard of had shattered that order in less than 5 minutes. Far across the sector, the USS Defiance had moved to a small moon orbiting an uninhabited gas giant. The moon had no strategic value and no resources worth harvesting. That was precisely why Jake Harrison had chosen it. He needed time to repair his ship, and he needed to avoid attention while doing so. Chief Engineer Cole worked without rest for 18 straight hours. He was a stocky man with graying hair and hands that were always stained with grease or lubricant. He knew the Defiance better than anyone, having served aboard her since her construction 10 years ago. The jump drive was his responsibility, and he took that responsibility seriously. "The main coil array is burned out," he reported to Jake over the intercom. "That is what caused the malfunction. We jumped at a bad angle and the whole system overloaded. I can rebuild it, but I need parts we do not have." Jake frowned. "Can you fabricate them?" "Some of them, others I will need to improvise. I have done more with less, Commander. Just give me time." Time was the one thing Jake was not sure they had. He stood on the bridge, watching the sensor displays for any sign of approaching ships. Lisa sat at her station nearby, running continuous scans of the surrounding space. "Nothing yet," she said, anticipating his question. "But it is only a matter of time. They will send another fleet, and this time they will send enough ships to make sure we cannot fight our way out." Jake nodded slowly. He had been thinking the same thing. Their victory in the first battle had been decisive, but it had also made them the most wanted targets in the sector. Every faction would want to know more about this mysterious human vessel. Some would want to capture it. Others would simply want to destroy it before it could become a threat. In her small communications alcove, Amy worked to intercept and translate alien transmissions. Her specialty was linguistics, and she had spent years studying the theoretical frameworks for understanding unknown languages. Now she was putting that training to practical use, building translation algorithms from the fragments of speech she captured from nearby signals. "Commander," she called out, her voice tight with concern, "I am picking up a lot of traffic on alien frequencies. Most of it I cannot translate yet, but there is one phrase that keeps appearing over and over." Jake walked to her station. "What phrase?" Amy looked up at him with troubled eyes. "The closest translation I can manage is the destroyers have come. Some variations say the Endbringers or the Death Walkers. I am hearing it from multiple sources, multiple species. They are all talking about us." Jake absorbed this information in silence. He had hoped that their arrival might be seen as a curiosity, perhaps even an opportunity for peaceful contact. Instead, they had become a source of terror. A single battle had transformed humanity from an unknown species into a galactic nightmare. "Keep monitoring," he said. "Let me know if anything changes." He returned to the command chair and sat down heavily. Lisa watched him with concern. "You look tired, sir." "I am tired, but I cannot afford to rest, not until we have some idea of what we are dealing with." Lisa hesitated before speaking again. "Sir, I have been reviewing the battle data. Our weapons performed beyond specifications. Our shields held against attacks that should have damaged them. I do not understand how we won so completely." Jake had been thinking about that too. The Defiance was a capable ship, but she was not designed to defeat entire fleets single-handedly. Something about human technology seemed to be fundamentally different from what these alien species used. More efficient, more powerful, more advanced. "Maybe we got lucky," he said, though he did not believe it. "With respect, sir, luck does not explain what happened. We outmaneuvered 300 ships. We destroyed them all without taking serious damage. That is not luck. That is superiority." The word hung in the air between them. Superiority. It was not a word that humans usually applied to themselves when thinking about alien life. Most of human history had been spent wondering whether they would be the underdogs if they ever met another intelligent species. They had imagined themselves as primitive newcomers, struggling to catch up to ancient civilizations. Now it seemed that reality was the opposite. On the third day of repairs, Amy intercepted a transmission that made Jake's blood run cold. It was a coordinated communication between multiple species, all agreeing to share information about the human vessel. They were forming an alliance. They were pooling their resources, and they were making plans. "They are calling it the Coalition of Order," Amy reported. 14 different species have agreed to join. They are gathering their fleets in neutral territory. "How many ships?" Jake asked. Amy checked her data and went pale. "Thousands, maybe tens of thousands. They are planning something big." Jake stood up and walked to the main. Outside, the barren surface of the moon stretched toward the horizon, gray and lifeless. Beyond it, the gas giant hung in the darkness like a massive eye watching them. Somewhere out there, a coalition of alien civilizations was preparing to hunt them down. They had 4 days until the jump drive would be ready. 4 days to survive against an enemy that feared them enough to unite an entire galaxy. Jake said into the intercom, "I need you to work faster." "I am working as fast as I can, Commander." "Work faster anyway, because if we are still here when those fleets arrive, none of us are getting home." Did not argue. He understood the stakes as well as anyone. On the bridge of the Defiance, the crew continued their work in tense silence. They were alone, far from home, surrounded by enemies. But they were also human, and humans had faced impossible odds before. They would face them again. The gathering took place at a station called the Nexus Point, a massive structure that floated in neutral space between the territories of a dozen different empires. For centuries, the Nexus Point had served as a place of negotiation and trade. Rivals met there to discuss treaties. Enemies met there to arrange truces. It was considered sacred ground by nearly every civilization in the region. Now it had become a war council. Representatives from 14 spacefaring civilizations filled the main assembly chamber. They came in all shapes and sizes. Some walked on 2 legs like humans. Others crawled on many limbs or floated in specially designed mobility units. Some breathed oxygen while others required methane or ammonia atmospheres contained in sealed helmets. They had nothing in common except one thing. They were all terrified. Grand Admiral of the military stood at the central podium. His body was tense with barely controlled rage. The destruction of his fleet had been the greatest military defeat in history, and he intended to make sure it would not go unanswered. "You have all seen the footage," he began, his mandibles clicking with each word. "You have all reviewed the sensor data. A single vessel from an unknown species appeared in our space and annihilated 300 of our finest warships. This is not a rumor. This is not an exaggeration. This happened. A murmur rippled through the chamber. Delegate of the collective leaned forward in her seat. She was a tall being with pale silver skin and large dark eyes that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Her people were known as scholars and scientists rather than warriors, and she had come to the gathering with more questions than answers. "What do we know about this species?" she asked. "Where do they come from? What are their intentions?" Turned his compound eyes toward her. "We have traced their origin to a small region of space in the outer spiral arm, a zone we have long ignored due to its lack of strategic value. The inhabitants call themselves humans." "Humans," repeated, testing the word. "And what do we know about them?" "Almost nothing. They appear to be a relatively young species. Our intelligence suggests they have only been capable of interstellar travel for 2 or 3 centuries, but their technology is beyond anything we have ever encountered." Paused, and when he spoke again his voice was heavy with reluctant admission. "Their weapons pierced our shields as if they did not exist. Their ship moved faster than any vessel we have ever recorded. Their defensive systems absorbed our attacks without apparent damage." Another delegate spoke up. This was High Warden of the Federation, a massive being with gray, rocky skin and 4 powerful arms. His people were known as warriors, and they had fought to a standstill in a border war 3 centuries ago. "You are telling us that a single ship from a species we have never heard of possesses technology superior to all of ours. How is that possible?" "I do not know how it is possible," replied. "I only know that it is true, and I know that if these humans have more ships, if they have fleets, then none of us are safe. They could conquer the entire sector if they chose to." The chamber erupted in anxious discussion. Species that had been rivals argued with each other about what to do. Some called for immediate military action. Others suggested attempts at diplomacy. A few proposed simply fleeing to distant regions of space where the humans might never find them. Listened to it all with growing unease. Something about the situation did not make sense to her. If the humans possessed such overwhelming power, why had they not already attacked? Why had their ship been alone? Why had their commander offered to leave peacefully before the fighting started? She tried to raise these questions, but her voice was lost in the chaos. Eventually, Grand Admiral restored order by slamming his armored fist against the podium. The sound echoed through the chamber like a thunderclap. "Enough! We did not gather here to argue among ourselves. We gathered here to address a threat that endangers all of us. The humans have demonstrated that they can destroy any fleet we send against them. Our only option is to combine our forces. Together, we may have a chance. Alone, we will fall one by one." High Warden rose to his feet. "The Federation agrees. We will commit our entire battle fleet to this effort." Other delegates began to voice their agreement. One by one, the 14 species pledged their military resources to a combined force. By the end of the session, they had agreed to assemble the largest armada in galactic history. 12,000 warships from 14 different civilizations would unite under a single command structure. They called themselves the Coalition of Order. Their mission was simple: find the human and destroy it before humanity could mobilize for war. Strike first, strike hard, and eliminate the threat before it could grow. Was chosen to lead the combined fleet. His defeat had given him more knowledge of human capabilities than anyone else possessed, and his rage ensured that he would pursue the mission with absolute dedication. "We will depart in 5 days," he announced. "Use that time to gather your forces and prepare your ships. When we move together, and we do not stop until the human threat has been eliminated." The delegates filed out of the chamber, each returning to their own ships to relay the decision to their governments. Was among the last to leave. She walked slowly, her mind troubled by doubts that she could not shake. She found herself stopping at a viewport that looked out into the endless darkness of space. Somewhere out there, in a region her people had never bothered to explore, a species called humanity was waiting. They did not know that an armada was being assembled to destroy them. They did not know that the galaxy had united against them. Or did they? The human vessel had shown technology far beyond anything the Coalition possessed. Was it possible that they were already aware of what was happening? Was it possible that they were preparing their own response? Felt a chill run down her spine. The Coalition was acting out of fear, rushing to destroy an enemy they did not understand. But what if that fear was causing them to make a terrible mistake? What if the humans were not actually a threat? What if they were simply explorers who had stumbled into the wrong part of space at the wrong time? She thought about the sensor footage she had reviewed. The human commander had offered to leave peacefully. He had asked for coordinates so he could return to his own territory. It was the who had attacked first, who had refused to negotiate, who had demanded surrender without discussion. What if the battle could have been avoided entirely? Made a decision. She would not join the attack. She would find the human ship herself and attempt to communicate with them directly. She needed to understand these beings before she could accept the Coalition's plan to exterminate them. It was a dangerous choice. If the Coalition discovered what she was doing, they would view her as a traitor, but had spent her entire life in pursuit of knowledge, and she could not participate in genocide based on ignorance. She returned to her ship and ordered her pilot to plot a course toward the last known position of the human vessel. The journey would take 3 days. By the time she arrived, she might find nothing but empty space. Or she might find answers that would change everything. Either way, she was committed. The Coalition had chosen war, chose truth. She would learn what the humans really were, even if it cost her everything. Behind her, the nexus point grew smaller in the viewport as her ship accelerated into the void. Ahead lay uncertainty, danger, and the possibility of discovery. Faced it with open eyes. Whatever happened next, she would face it knowing that she had tried to understand before she condemned. It was the only path her conscience would allow. Jake Harrison had made a decision that his crew questioned but ultimately supported. Rather than hiding in silence and waiting for the repairs to finish, he ordered Amy to broadcast a message on all known frequencies. It was a risk, but Jake believed that communication was better than silence. "This is Commander Jake Harrison of the Earth vessel Defiance," the message said. "We have no hostile intentions toward any species in this region. Our presence here was accidental, the result of a navigation malfunction. We wish only to return to our own territory. We are willing to share information and establish peaceful relations with any civilization that approaches us without hostility." The message played on repeat for 2 full days. There was no response. The silence weighed heavily on everyone aboard the ship. They knew that alien forces were gathering somewhere out there. They knew that time was running out. On the 3rd day, something changed. Lisa Monroe spotted it first on her sensor display. A small vessel was approaching from the outer edge of the system. It moved slowly, almost cautiously, and it made no effort to hide its presence. "Single ship," Lisa reported. "No weapons charge detected. It appears to be civilian in design." Jake studied the display with narrowed eyes. "Any identification?" "Marking matches records from our intercepts. Collective. They were one of the species mentioned in the Coalition communications." Jake considered his options. This could be a trap, a scout sent to locate them before the main fleet arrived. But the ship was alone, unarmed, and approaching openly. That suggested something different. "Let them come," he said, "and prepare a welcome party." The vessel docked at the Defiance's main airlock 2 hours later. Jake waited there personally, accompanied by Lisa and a small security team. He did not know what to expect, and he wanted to be ready for anything. The airlock opened with a soft hiss, and delegates stepped through. She was tall and slender, with silver skin that seemed to shimmer slightly in the artificial lighting. Her large, dark eyes moved across the welcoming party with obvious curiosity, studying each human with intense focus. She wore simple robes of deep blue fabric, and she carried no visible weapons. "I am of the collective," she said. Her voice was soft but clear, translated through a device attached to her collar. "I come alone and in peace. I wish to understand your people." Jake stepped forward and extended his hand, a gesture that seemed to puzzle until Amy quickly explained its meaning, then reached out and touched his hand gently with her long fingers, completing the greeting. "I am Commander Jake Harrison. Welcome aboard the Defiance." What followed was the most important conversation in galactic history, though none of them understood that at the time. Jake gave full access to the ship's historical database. He had nothing to hide, and he believed that honesty was the best foundation for any relationship. For hours, sat in the ship's small library, absorbing information about human history, culture, science, and society. She learned about the wars that had shaped human civilization, the great conflicts that had killed millions, the struggles for freedom, for justice, for survival. She learned about the disasters they had overcome, ice ages that had nearly wiped them out, plagues that had decimated their population, environmental crises that had threatened their entire planet. And she learned about their achievements, their art and music and literature, their scientific discoveries, their exploration of their own solar system and their eventual reach toward the stars, the journey from primitive creatures to spacefaring civilization, compressed into a span of time that seemed impossibly short. 300 years, said, her voice trembling with disbelief. You developed interstellar travel in 300 years. Lisa nodded. A little less, actually. Our first powered flight was about 4 centuries ago. We reached our nearest planets within 100 years after that. We discovered faster-than-light travel about 2 centuries ago and have been expanding ever since. Stared at her with an expression that might have been awe or fear or both. Do you understand what you are saying? Most species require thousands of years to achieve what you have done. Some require tens of thousands. The needed nearly 50 to reach their current level of technology. We know we developed quickly, Jake said. We have never really understood why. Rose from her seat and walked to a viewport that showed the stars outside. Her reflection stared back at her, silver and ghost-like against the darkness. I have a theory, she said quietly. Your world must have been harsh, unforgiving. Only a species constantly under pressure would evolve to advance so rapidly. You were forced to adapt or die over and over again, and each time you adapted. Jake thought about that. Human history was certainly filled with hardship. Predators, disease, natural disasters, competition for resources. Every generation had faced challenges that could have ended their existence, and every generation had found ways to overcome them. Maybe that is part of it, he admitted. But I think there is something else too. We are never satisfied. We always want to know more, see more, do more. We call it curiosity, or stubbornness depending on who you ask. Turn back to face him. The Coalition believes you are a threat. They are gathering a fleet of 12,000 ships to find you and destroy it. They are afraid of what you might become. The words hit Jake like a physical blow. 12,000 ships. Even with the Defiance's superior technology, those numbers were overwhelming. And even if they could win such a battle, Earth did not have enough ships to protect itself from that kind of assault. We do not want war, Jake said firmly. We never wanted any of this. We were just trying to go home. Studied his face for a long moment. I believe you, and that is why I am here. I needed to understand before I could decide what to do. What will you do? Was silent for several seconds before answering. I will send everything I have learned to the archives. My people will know the truth about humanity, and I will send a message to the Coalition. I will tell them that they are making a terrible mistake. Lisa spoke up. Will they listen? I do not know. Fear is a powerful force. It makes people do things they would never do otherwise. The coalition is afraid because they have never encountered anything like you. Your existence challenges everything they believed about their place in the universe. Jake nodded slowly. He understood fear. He had seen what it could do to people, how it could drive them to terrible decisions. But he also knew that fear could be overcome. Understanding could replace ignorance. Trust could replace suspicion. It would not be easy, but it was possible. Send your message, he said. Tell them we want peace. Tell them we are willing to talk, to negotiate, to find a solution that does not involve more fighting, but also tell them this. He paused and made sure was looking directly into his eyes. If they attack us, if they threaten our home, we will defend ourselves. We did not choose this conflict, but we will not run from it either. Held his gaze for a long moment, then she nodded once. I will tell them everything. She composed her message carefully, including the historical data, her observations, and her conclusions. She sent it to the archives, to the coalition leadership, and to every species that had joined the alliance against humanity. The message was received, it was reviewed, it was discussed, and it was ignored. The coalition fleet launched 3 days later. The coalition fleet emerged from hyperspace at the edge of human territory like a storm rolling across an empty plain. 12,000 warships from 14 different civilizations filled the void, their combined firepower representing the greatest military force ever assembled in recorded galactic history. Grand Admiral stood on the bridge of his command vessel, watching the sensor displays with cold satisfaction. Begin long-range scans, he ordered. Find there. His officers obeyed instantly. Data flowed across their screens as they mapped the region and searched for signs of human civilization. They expected to find a small colony, perhaps a few dozen worlds at most. What they found instead made mandibles click with sudden unease. Admiral, his sensor officer reported, we are detecting human vessels, 17 of them. They are moving to intercept. Turned his compound eyes toward the tactical display. 17 ships. The coalition outnumbered them by a factor of more than 700 to 1. By any rational calculation, this should have been a slaughter. But had seen what a single human ship could do. And now he found himself wondering why these 17 were not retreating. Admiral Diana commanded the human defense fleet from the bridge of the USS Liberty. She was a veteran officer with 30 years of experience, gray hair cut short and practical, and eyes that had seen more battles than she cared to remember. She had received Jake Harrison's distress signal 4 days earlier and had been tracking the coalition's approach ever since. Admiral, her tactical officer reported, the enemy fleet is holding position. They appear to be scanning the area. Diana allowed herself a small smile. She knew what the aliens were doing. They were looking at their sensors, counting the human ships, and trying to understand why 17 vessels would face 12,000 without retreating. The answer was simple. Humans did not run from threats to their home. She opened a communication channel that her officers had spent days calibrating to reach the alien fleet. Coalition fleet, this is Admiral Diana of the United Earth Navy. You have entered human territory with clear hostile intent. I am giving you one chance to withdraw. Take it. The response came from Grand Admiral himself. His translated voice was harsh with contempt. You are outnumbered 700 to 1, human. Your arrogance will be your end. Surrender now and we may show mercy. Diana's smile faded into something harder and colder. We tried to warn you. She cut the channel and turned to her bridge crew. Every station was manned by someone she trusted with her life. They had trained together, fought together, bled together. They knew what was at stake. All ships, she said calmly, engage at will. What followed would later be called the Battle of the Threshold. It would be studied by military historians for centuries. analyzed and debated and reconstructed in countless simulations. But no simulation could truly capture what happened in those 23 minutes. The human ships moved with a speed and coordination that everything the coalition understood about space combat. They did not form defensive lines or protective formations. Instead, they attacked. They plunged directly into the heart of the enemy fleet like wolves tearing into a herd of prey. Coalition ships began to die almost immediately. Their weapons fired in desperate salvos, but the human vessels dodged and weaved through the incoming fire with impossible precision. Their shields absorbed what hits did land, shrugging off attacks that should have been devastating. And then the human weapons spoke. Each human ship carried a complement of Nova-class torpedoes. They were originally designed for use against heavily fortified planetary installations. Against starships, they were devastatingly effective. A single torpedo could gut a cruiser. 3 could split a battleship in half. The humans launched them in waves, each strike perfectly calculated to maximize destruction. Grand Admiral watched in horror as his fleet was torn apart around him. Ships that had survived wars spanning centuries were reduced to expanding clouds of debris in seconds. Commanders who had led their forces through countless victories died screaming as their bridges were blown open to the void. "All ships fall back," screamed into his command channel. "Retreat, retreat." But retreat was not easy when your enemy moved faster than you could run. The human ships pursued the fleeing coalition vessels, picking them off with ruthless efficiency. They showed no mercy, gave no quarter, asked for no surrender. They fought the way a species that had spent its entire existence struggling for survival fought. They fought to win. When it was over, the human fleet reformed at the center of a debris field that stretched across thousands of kilometers. 4,000 coalition ships had been destroyed. Another 3,000 were disabled and drifting, their crews dead or dying. The survivors had scattered into hyperspace, their commanders transmitting desperate reports back to The human fleet had lost 2 ships. 37 crew members had died. It was a victory so complete that it belief. Admiral surveyed the aftermath with no satisfaction in her eyes. She had done what was necessary to protect Earth, but she took no pleasure in the killing. Every destroyed ship represented lives ended, families broken, futures erased. Even the lives of enemies had value. "Signal the disabled vessels," she ordered. "Offer to rescue any survivors who want to surrender. We are not monsters." Her officers obeyed. Within hours, rescue operations were. Coalition crew members who had expected death were instead brought aboard human ships, treated by human doctors, and held as guests rather than prisoners. Many of them had never experienced such treatment from an enemy. In the weeks that followed, the surviving coalition members faced an impossible choice. They could continue the war and face certain extinction, or they could sue for peace and hope that humanity would show the same mercy they had shown to the survivors of the battle. They chose peace. 6 months later, representatives from 23 alien civilizations gathered on Earth to sign the Treaty of Common Understanding. Delegate had been instrumental in the negotiations, serving as a bridge between humanity and the terrified galaxy. Her message had been ignored before the battle, but afterward it was remembered. She had tried to warn them. She had tried to prevent the disaster. Commander Jake Harrison stood in the Grand Assembly Hall, watching the delegates sign the treaty one by one. Lisa Monroe stood beside him in her dress uniform, her expression thoughtful. "Think they will honor it?" she asked quietly. Jake watched the alien representatives. Some still looked hostile, others seemed curious. A few showed open fear even now, months after the fighting had ended. "Some will," he replied. "Some will not, but the ones who do might discover that humans make better friends than enemies." Approached them, her silver skin pale in the assembly hall lights. "Your species continues to surprise me, Commander. You had the power to conquer us all. Instead, you offered partnership." Jake shrugged. We have tried conquest before among ourselves. It never works the way you hope. Better to build bridges than burn them. Tilted her head in a gesture that Jake had learned meant curiosity. And if someone tries to burn the bridges you have built? Lisa answered before Jake could. Then we remind them why they were afraid of us in the first place. Studied her for a moment, then nodded slowly. An honest answer, perhaps the most honest anyone has given me since this all began. In the years that followed, humanity's reputation spread to every corner of the galaxy. They were known as the species that could not be conquered, could not be intimidated, could not be stopped. Ancient empires treated human ambassadors with careful respect. Powerful civilizations thought twice before threatening human interests. But humanity was also known for something else. Their willingness to help those who asked. Their curiosity about new cultures and new ideas. Their strange insistence on treating all sentient beings as potential friends rather than inevitable enemies. The galaxy had expected destroyers. Instead, they got something far more complicated. They got humans, fierce and gentle, terrifying and kind, capable of both terrible violence and remarkable compassion. It was not what anyone had anticipated, but it was exactly what humanity had always been.